Hello, Facebook Live and YouTube streaming. Welcome to Wine Cellars Wine Weekend. I am your host, Lee Schlesinger, and I am Vice President of Portfolio Management and Education at Wine Cellars. We are going to continue this weekend with another German producer. I kind of confessed my love for German Riesling, and I might have overstated my affection for the Mosel. It is certainly very, very strong, but there are other great regions of Germany producing fantastic Riesling, and not all of it is sweet. Everything that we had last weekend had a decent amount of residual sugar to it, so those wines are what we would consider at least off dry. We're going to taste a little bit more dry style Riesling along with our traditional Pradikats with some residual sugar to them. But we're going to go to a different section of a river, the Rhine, which is one of the main river through wine growing country, and we're going to visit the Rhienhessen. We're going to meet Ursula Schneider Muller and her husband Stefan Muller, who together are 9th generation working at Schneider, Georg Albrecht Schneider. So another winery with great history being handed down family generation to generation. We're going to see some really cool older pictures of old vintage people as well as wines. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to Wine Cellars Wine Weekend one of my favorite, the lovely and knowledgeable Ursula, and her winemaking husband, Stefan. How's that for an introduction, guys? How are you doing?
That was nice, and just in time with the light. So, yeah, we hope you see us well from the other side of the world.
We hear and see you well. So you're in Nierstein in Germany, and it's what, about 9 p.m. there?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Saturday
evening.
9 p.m. Yeah, the winery was open today, so we had a lot of people coming in and tasting wines and buying wines, and we're looking forward to cheers to you guys over in the US.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you give us a little background on the winery and your part in it, and obviously we want to talk about the connection with Stefan and his family and his winemaking background and how it all comes together there in Nierstein. So you guys want to take it away, and we can pull up the presentation anytime that you want to jump into that.
Yeah. So I would start. We are, as you said, the 9th generation of the Schneider estate. Stefan and I took over in 2014. The winery started in the early 1800s. The kind of funny story is that Napoleon rushed through Europe and took what he could, and in order to get money for his army and war, he took from the noble and from the churches, and all of a sudden normal people could buy land. So he took that land and sold it to everybody who wants it. And back then it was the first time that just basic people could buy land, and my ancestor did so, and we started with our first vineyards back then. So since then quite things have changed, but the soils and the wines are still there, and we're still in that family traditional winemaking life, basically. Yeah. So for the two of us, Stefan studied winemaking in Geisenheim, and
I have my own winery in the smaller part of Nierstein. And at some point in history, we both met. And
wine festival.
So that's and then things went on.
Things went on. In between, I took a different job and worked for a different branch. And at a certain point, it felt really good to come back into the family business. And Stefan, who got along with my parents very well, and it was just a good step for us to not just do the Müller estate, Stefan's winery, but also be the next generation in the Schneider estate. So that what happened, 11 years ago.
And you have little 10th generation running around there too, yes?
Yeah. They're just stuck in front of the TV. They might come over here later and say a little hello.
And how interested are they in viticulture and wine and what's happening at the winery? Do they enjoy it now?
I would say so. They like to help. They like to be in the vineyards. Actually, some of our homeschooling now during Corona times took part in the vineyards. But yeah, I would say yes. The little boy.
They grow up in the winery with our work, with all the people that are around and are enjoying wine. So I think they grow up in an environment of wine, and I think at the moment it's more joy and fun. Louis, our son, thinks about getting big in agricultural, which is a problem because there is not so much to do with agricultural in here, because there's vineyards everywhere you look. There's vines, and there's not really agricultural business to do, but maybe that will change.
Depending on the tractors. That's the important part.
He's more into the big tractors, we'll see. We'll see.
So before we jump into the presentation, we got a couple people that want to say hi. I bet you can guess who one of them might be.
Oh, Mr. Winicombe.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, Derek.
Hey, Derek.
Derek is our friend who works with us. He's a work colleague, and he's in Germany, and he helps bring some of these estates to us here in the U.S. So, hi, Derek. And then we also have a big supporter, Simply Divine Oil and Wine. They've been with us quite a bit, and hopefully they have supported us with some love to the Schneider wines. So, hello to them. And I think let's jump into the presentation, and we'll talk again a little bit maybe about some of the labeling, and we're certainly seeing some of those great images. So we'll see some of your kids in the vineyards too, I think, in some of this stuff. So let's take a look at what we got up there and follow along a little bit of program. I think we've got some really great images and some videos to help bring everybody to Nierstein and talk about what you mentioned. Soil type we'll certainly talk about. And I think you guys have already started, but we're going to start drinking some wine soon too, I think. So let's take a look at what we got. Again, welcome everybody to our virtual tasting with the Schneider estate. And so here's your coat of arms.
Yep, the coat of arms that was given to the family. And as you can see, the little guy has more of an agricultural background. So he has a
sickle
and a sickle in his hands, and on some of the wines you still see the full coat of arms today, but also we have a more modern style where we just focus on that little guy. We felt like he has been in the coat of arms for so many years. He could be the center of attention for the next couple of years. So yeah,
it's kind of ironic that you're growing grapes. I mean, it's agriculture, but not viticulture. It looks like he's more into barley and wheat and brewing beer.
Yeah, that's true.
So we've got some harvest picture going back to the late 19th century here.
Yeah, it's interesting to see.
That were taken in the vineyards. Everyone was working, getting dressed up for the picture, and it's a really big crowd that was doing the work back then. I guess we see more modern pictures later. There you can see it's getting a bit smaller now. And the transportation system changed a bit, but wine and vines have been in the family and in Nierstein for years and generations. So
and do you suppose that that's somewhere in the bottom of the Hipping Vineyard site, or do you know where that might be taken?
It's hard to tell since it's a little bit blurred, but I think it's probably around the corner from the hipping. It's we're not quite sure.
Okay, let's take a look at some of these newer pictures.
Because of the land reforms in the 70s, where the direction and the roads in the vineyards, they changed a bit, and so I guess you don't really see the Rhine River, so that's either because of the bad weather or it might be just around the corner, as Ursula said, so more facing west.
Okay, here we're I think this harvest predates Ursula, predates both of you guys. This is my birth year, so now everybody knows I'm old.
1969. Picture 1969. My grandmother is in that picture, and we believe that my dad took the picture. So actually, some of that women that went with that crew, I still remember being with us until the late 80s, early 90s, harvesting every year. Even though the crowd got smaller, the people kept coming and working with us. And that's in the red slate, I think. But Stefan says that's at the hipping, but a picture taking up into the vineyard. Yeah.
Awesome. And here's 1989, 20 years later.
Yeah, and there you see me and my sister in the front. My sister's holding the sign. I'm standing right behind her. And that's one classic when I was little, that always the last vineyard that was harvested was the hipping. So that was the big final, the big countdown, and where kind of like the harvest and celebrations took place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, right?
Well, and back then,
especially in the steeper hills,
and back then we did it was a long time of harvest. We did probably 6 to 8 weeks, and today everything is more compressed. We work more on the weather. We work different ways. We do a lot more hand harvest now than about 10 years ago, but still we are more reactive, I would say.
Yeah, and you're how many hectares and acres are you guys?
So we can do the hectares. You have to do the acres.
I can do that.
So it's 25 hectares, the two wineries together.
So that's like 60 some odd acres.
Yeah.
52 and a half. How about that?
I'm trying to figure it out, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
that's a decent size. It's not minuscule. Yeah. It's
get a picture of it. It's about 125,000 vines that have to be grown every year.
And cared for, harvested, and pruned, and retrained, and all that vineyard work. Yeah, and that's obviously where wine quality starts. And here's a slightly more recent picture. This is only 6-8 months ago.
Yeah, so that's
the 2019 vintage, which was a really dense and hard picking, and we finished in hipping and said, oh, let's try to do the same picture as they did in 69, and bring the crew together, bring the kids together, and so, and of course, bring the flag from the 69, which was still resting, in somewhere in the office, in the back office, and
That's so cool, and this will continue for generations. Hopefully, the 10th, 11th, 12th generation will be looking back at these pictures the same way we're looking back. So that's fun. I've had a request already. Derek must be thirsty. He was probably out bike riding all day. So
I think he was, yeah.
So let's taste the first wine.
What?
Taste the first wine.
Let's taste the first wine. And out there. So I think we should talk maybe a little bit about the labeling between the dry and the sweet wines. And we'll start maybe with why the labels look a little bit different on the dry wines versus the sweet wines.
Yeah. So one thing is that in our domestic and European market, we actually only work on this label since we needed kind of like a more modern way to get off the shelf here, to tell the story that there's tradition, but also a new generation. So we switched to that one in the domestic and in the European market, and stayed with the more traditional way for the US.
Okay.
And then
for the sweets.
Yeah. So we thought it might be a nice idea to have the people see that it's from the same estate but has a different look, it probably makes it easier to understand which one is the sweeter, which one is the drier. Well, it's both Riesling. Can you help me? Yeah, to make these kind of decisions a little bit easier for the customers in the US.
Okay, so we're gonna start with the dry one, but I rated our cellars at Wine Cellars here in Chicago, and I dug up this.
Oh, nice.
So this is not quite the same wine, I don't think, as the Vom Koch that we are out there with. It has a single vineyard designate, where this does not have a single vineyard designate.
But actually, the vineyard is actually only Paderberg. So in the Vom Kalk, we do have single vineyard grapes, but we don't point it out on the label anymore. There's already a lot of information.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Totally get that. And I think one of the more important things, if you didn't have the delineation that the different label, it does say Trocken on the label, so you know that wine means it's dry, Trocken and dry.
Yeah. You also learned some German. Hey.
Translated right on the label for us. So right away, let's talk about so the 11 has a little bit of color you might be able to see. It's got a little orange glint to it. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what Vom Koch means and why we're picking out certain parts of the Paderberg vineyard site, and we'll kind of dig into that kind of terroir thing, and then we'll jump back into Germany and kind of back it out a little bit again.
Can you jump in the presentation to the one picture which shows the two soils?
Absolutely.
That would be cool. So for those of us who don't know, we work on two very main soils. We have the red slate and also the limestone, the kalk. Can you go one? Yeah, this is the red. Yeah, one more. Yeah, I think this shows it pretty well. So we have two very different soils. On your right, I believe, is the red slate, which is the Hipping vineyard is red slate. So it's actually a hard pressed sandstone that has the looks of a slate, is rich on iron. And on the other side, we have the limestone, which translated is Vom Kalk. So Vom Kalk means limestone soil. And we thought it would be very interesting for the people to know that the wine comes from exactly that soil, 100%, and shows all the pure energy of that soil. Stefan, what do you want to add?
Yeah, because it's so interesting to see how different the Riesling grapes and the Riesling wines react on the different soils. Ursula's father started it years ago, when nobody was really talking about terroir and the big thing. Since then, you can taste every year the simple difference between limestone and red slate, which is even for the non-Riesling pro, easy to see and easy to taste difference. Limestone is I always compare the stones with the wines. Limestone wines are always a bit more edgy, but even more focused, more on the point. while the red slate is multi-layered. It is a bit more exotic. You cannot, find the red slate everywhere in Rhienhessen, which makes it for us a real special thing. The red slate is able to store the heat. It heats up really quick because it's so dark. While the limestone is a lighter, a brighter stone, and the soil is brighter, so it reflects the sun into the grapes, but it doesn't heat up. So you get a really, different wine from complete different soils, which are placed like 1 kilometer from each other, so they can see each other.
This shows it's pretty good, this picture. I'm sorry to interrupt. So this picture is taken in the Vom Kalk vineyard, looking over to the red slate, to the hipping. So it's pretty close to each other, and the vineyard work and the winemaking work are very comparable, and you can taste a huge difference between the two kind of Rieslings.
Yeah, I think that it's important to realize that there's a difference between heat absorption between the two types of soils, but also, in general, what we've learned as wine geeks is that when we plant on acidic soils, we tend to get basic wines, and when we plant on soils with high pHs like chalk, we're going to get very high acid wines, and that tends to be what we're seeing here, I think. And what we see elsewhere across the wine growing world. And if I can throw in my 2 cents about the difference, hopefully we'll catch up and we'll have other people taste the differences between the wines. But the chalk soils for me always give me this lemon lime citrus driven focus, kind of linear focus. You said on point, and I think that this very focused lemon lime profile is characteristic. And if I can again add my 2 cents about Riesling, is that Riesling is super reactive to the soil and the terroir, which is what makes it such a versatile and interesting grape. And just being, you said like a kilometer or a mile, or less than a mile apart, just on the other side of town, you're getting 2 very different expressions from really not too dissimilar, other than the soil type and maybe a little bit of exposure and aspect, but within a mile from each other, you're producing 2 very different wines.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
To go on to the kalk itself, as you said, it's very citrusy, it's stony, edgy, it has that salty end, and we like it extremely with any kind of food. I think it's very versatile, with a lot of different cuisines, and always be a good companion. What Steffen is adding: fish, white meat, salads, light barbecues, everything. Yeah, we kind of want right now in that spring, early summer days.
We have a comment here, and I think it's important to show because Germany has traditionally, you're at around the 50th parallel or so, 49th, something like that, which is very, very far north. So we consider your wine growing region somewhat marginal, which is why you move marginal, meaning it's an area that is right on the edge of where you're supposed to be growing wine. And the reason why you are south facing or on inclines is to get as much sun exposure and as much sun as possible in a very cool climate. And this conversation about heat absorption and soil type is important in German wine production and always has, but maybe a little bit less with some global climate change, a little bit more heat and more predictability and from vintage to vintage, yes?
Basically we go from vintage to vintage, definitely.
So the climate change is actual here. There is nothing to discuss about it. So since the 2000 or the change, the millennium, we had not had any really bad or not ripe vintages. So the climate changes are here, and at the moment they work for us. So the heat absorption of, as the question or the sentence says, has been more important for the last generations. It's getting important to us, but in a different meaning. So we try not to heat up the soil too much, to heat up the grapes too much, to get that fruity and lovely style of Riesling we want. You don't want a Riesling with no acid. You don't want a Riesling with 14 or 14.5%. So the change of importance is that the last generations were glad to have those heating up stones facing south, southeast, southwest, and to get the ripe fruit and flavors. And we are now thinking about how can we reduce the heat up? How can we still let the Rieslings be Rieslings?
And save water. That's been an aspect in the last 2 years, 3 years, basically, to keep the water that comes from rain and keep it into soils. And so, yeah, these are the main aspects in the climate change right now.
Yeah, we're seeing this all over the world. In some places, more marginal, cooler places seem some sort of minor benefit maybe, whereas places that were already marginally too warm are really suffering with drought and ripeness because it's too hot.
Yeah.
So it's definitely shifting out there, and everybody I talk to says it's a reality for what they see out there. And so I think the last cool string of vintages might have been in the late 90s. I remember the 2000 vintage was considered so fantastic because it was a relatively warm vintage. And then you had 2001 and 2002, which were also warm vintages. And then, of course, 2003, which might have been the warmest vintage ever seen, to at least recorded in Germany and across Europe.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it seems like like you're harvesting much more compacted time frames, and you're not struggling for ripeness.
Yeah.
I was young. Harvest time was starting something around 25th of September, and it ended in the beginning of November or in the middle of November, which was quite normal. Now we are talking about starting in the end of August and beginning of September, and being at the end in the beginning of October.
Yeah.
So it's like 4 weeks at least.
One good example is that when we got married in 2009, we planned a wedding in September, which was no deal. And since then, we never had basically an anniversary day without harvest. So just over the last 10 years, this has been shifting to the front.
Yeah, earlier and earlier. Well, I think this brings us right into, let's talk about specifically where you guys are located in Germany and the wine growing regions. I think this is a nice transition. So I'll pull back up the presentation and we'll take a closer look and figure out where exactly you are, how far north you are and where you're located and why you're located along the rivers and all that kind of good stuff. All right, hang on, bear with me 1 second. Let's get me back up and running. All right, you see the presentation there?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll go back to some of these maps. I'm a big map person. I like taking a look. So I think this one has a little bit of runtime on it. So go ahead and describe it to us as we play it.
Yeah. So this is a look over actually Germany in the middle and Europe. And if you see my little cursor going, you see Berlin now on the right. And then in the middle, the orange point is Rhienhessen. So we are pretty much in the center of Europe. And now it's zooming in. This is Frankfurt on the right, where the cursor just was. And now you can already see the River Rhine. We're zooming in, and hey, there's Nierstein. And what we said, so on top of Nierstein is the red slate, as we were talking about it. And just on the other side is all the limestone. Yeah, that's very good. Thank you, Lee. And now we zoom in until you see where the winery is located. I feel like often it's surprisingly for people that actually all the wineries are located in town and the vineyards are spread around it. Zoom out. So now we see Europe, and in the middle, the orange little spot is Rhienhessen. That's where we are right now. Yeah, as we said, we're directly on the River Rhine. Steffen just said, well, we just live there because it's a good view.
For us, during our work and for our wines during their growth. So, maybe they got the better view than us, but it's, of course, the River Rhine is the center of wine growing in Germany, because along the river the Romans kept moving in and brought the grapes with them and looked for the best spots to plant them. And the river brings not only water for the groundwater or for the lowest parts of the vineyards. It also is like a warm water heat in winter, so the frost doesn't get too hard for the vineyards that are located directly at the Rhine River. It reflects the sun, so the vineyards that are looking at the Rhine River, they got the double sun. So that's, I guess, one of the main reasons for us. Of course, the Rhine River was always a transportation route for wine, to bring it into different regions of Germany or the world.
Yeah, and we already talked about exposure and aspect, which are also important. Generally, the best sites or the warmest sites are south, some sort of south-facing on a slope.
Yeah.
So here's another picture of Nierstein, and again, to the north, you have the Rotterhang, or the red slope, with your red sandstone, iron-rich sandstone. Yeah. And then here we have the Paterberg vineyard site that we've been discussing, and I think that brings us to the next wine.
Yeah. So, we'll stick to the vom Kalk, to the Paterberg, but we're going to a more classic kind of way. So Paterberg Riesling Cabinet.
Yep, and what you have 2018 vintage there too?
Yeah, you do too. Yay.
Yeah, a relative baby. We'll talk about the aging potential. I mean, we didn't really talk too much about the flavor characteristics off the wine, other than kind of general characteristics. But maybe here we'll dig in a little bit more and talk about a wine in its youth and some of these primary things and the early structure, and then we'll talk about with maybe the hipping Spätlese, its ageability and that kind of context.
Yeah, actually, I was just saying, how did we say anything about the wine? So, we'll keep on.
So, some tasting notes or generalities that we want to talk about with this wine.
So important is that we're still on that limestone soil. So we have that typical kind of, very crisp, fresh, elegant style. This is a cabinet, so it has a nice level of residual sugar that kind of plays with that pure, nice acidity, especially in this young stadium.
I'm still
into the wine.
Still talking to the wine.
Well, I certainly feel the acidity through here. Very, very bright, and a little tropical note. There's good brightness here.
Yeah, you have to see that 2018, the vintage was really big. We had so much sun, even more 2003. And the good thing was that we already had 2003. So we knew what could happen if, the grapes get too ripe. So we were focusing on the harvest time being the perfect point of being ripe in flavor, but still crispy and lovely on the palate. So
yeah, it still has all that bright acidity. First thing I feel the wine before I even really taste it. I smell the minerality. There's still a lot of complexity there, but that acidity is still searing. Oh, there's the 10th generation. Wave hi to the internet, little ones.
What's up?
I said wave hi to the internet.
Yeah.
So, oh my God. You said you feel the wine before you taste it? No, I'm
very, very structured. And then these tropical notes really dance around. So it's partly because of a very warm vintage, I guess, that you get some of these pineapple-y kind of notes.
Yeah, and of course it's because the grapes were so pure. There was really no botrytis in it, which could happen in a normal vintage. That there are some botrytis grapes in it, but in 2018 it was pure clear fruit. So that's it. That's the recipe for the 2018 part of a cabinet. Yeah.
So we have a good question here, pulled right out of what we're talking about. PJ, Pure Wine Cafe, are there any vineyard management pruning techniques that become more important in warmer vintages like 18 or 03?
So to see pruning as cutting the vines in the early springtime, it doesn't change too much, but what is changing is the leaf management. So the height of the we call it leaf wall. So it is cut a bit lower to reduce the photosynthesis potential. So not too much sugar is produced. We used to pick the leaves on both sides of the rows, which is changing now. We're just picking them on the shadow side, on the shade side, which is mainly north or east. So there are experiments with shading stuff where you can cool down the whole grape zone, but that is not in our winery. We are at the moment trying to keep it as we do.
So a little canopy management, you reduce the amount of leaves so you don't see as much photosynthesis, so you don't build sugars too quickly. That will slow down that sugar ripeness and allow that phenolic ripeness to catch up. And then you'll also leave some leaves on the sunny side to protect direct sunlight from hitting the grapes as well.
Yep, that's it.
And you guys are all dry farmed, so no irrigation, right?
There's no irrigation, only in the fresh planted young vineyards. In some years, we used to, we bring some water in, but there is no irrigation system in our vineyards.
Yeah, and that's so you have to rely on the grapes themselves, the vines themselves, to go find water at that water table.
Yeah. So we do have some work in the vineyard. So we like to spread humus and straw to keep the water that's already in the soils, to keep it there longer, to have it there for the grape wines. We kind of like to have a good average of age of all the wines all over the winery, to, not have only young wines and not have only old vineyards to, in order to have a good average.
Yeah, especially on the red slate, it's a good thing to have older wines that root deeper and have a better potential of managing those really dry and sunny years we had.
Yeah.
You can see that in the last years that the younger vineyards, they stopped working in July, and in the worst years or best years, depends, the sunniest years, they lose the grapes, the leaves, and the old vines, they can stand it a really long until harvest. So that's it.
Yeah, we see that all over the place where these old vines dig deep, are able to find water, and young vines are not, and how important humus is to the soil and water retention. And everybody's paying attention to this now for sure with our climate change. We've talked a lot about the vineyards. Let's go see the vineyards, shall we?
Yeah.
So we've got some, let's start with some of the general pictures. I know Stefan was out in the vineyards. He's probably out there every day, but he took some pictures today.
Nice, yeah. Sometimes I have to be in the cellar. Yeah. I try to do this when it's raining, but it doesn't rain too much, so I have to go in the cellar when it's sunny too.
All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look at some of the great images that you captured for us. I mean, we've seen maps and stuff, but I really think that looking at this majestic terroir that we have here is will help bring us a little closer to the vines, the grapes, and the wine. So let me get us here. And so these are our vineyard sites. We're pretty familiar. We've seen some landscape, but let's take a look at some more landscape, and then again revisiting the Rotterhang. So this is looking south, yes?
Yeah.
It's looking south along the red slate, the red slope, looking on Nierstein city, and of course on the right there is the red slate with Hipping, and in the back you can see the Paderberg. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw this picture too. That's looking the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about the Rotterhang red slate, harvest in the Hipping. Some nice images from actually inside the vineyard. Look at how healthy and happy those grapes look.
Yeah, that was 2018. Yeah.
They're probably glad to come in out of the sun.
Yeah, I think it was 19. And well, one thing we actually do in the vineyard is that we select. So especially like in vineyards like the Hipping, we pretty much take every grape and select what we want and what we don't want. So they look really nice. They did a great job.
Yeah, and like I've worked a few harvests out there, and normally you see a lot of non-grape material in there, and that's not only are the grapes whole and healthy, but there's no extraneous material being harvested. So good work on those harvesters. Keep them another 20 years.
Yeah.
Another great, and I think this is a nice shot because it kind of shows the sun and reflectivity off the river.
Yep.
And how it magnifies, and you get extra photosynthesis happening in your very northerly area.
Yes, exactly.
So I think we recognize some of these guys.
Yeah. So that's Stefan actually in front of our press tasting. In this case, it's actually a Sauvignon Blanc juice, just right from the press, and seeing the quality. And then we are bottling Magnum bottles on the left side. That's all going by hand. And actually on the right, there's some serious cellar work with our youngster, this is Louis. He helped out.
He looks like a perfect little vintner with his boots on.
Yeah.
He has a lot of them.
Yeah. He wants them in every house. We need some. Yeah.
We have a little picture of you driving along kind of that smaller road that sits at the top of the Hipping vineyard site. So let's take a quick peek, and we're driving north along the Rhine and taking a look downhill into the Hipping.
Yeah.
As you can see, we mainly drive along the hipping because we like the view so much.
Yeah. So that's actually in the middle of it. So that's the mid-steep part, and yeah, this one can still be worked with the tractor. No, that's the way up. Yeah, no, it can't.
It
I
can
was
only
quite
be right
sure.
for the tractor one time, and then you're gone. So
The tractor's gone too.
no, that's completely handwork.
Handwork.
So yeah.
And we'll, I think this is the perfect excuse on this video to maybe open up that hipping Spätlese, which is on our taste. So I will pull this down here. We'll take a look at some pictures that you took from earlier today while we taste our hipping Spätlese. Current vintage out there is being sold. You probably find 17 and 18 out in the U.S. market. Again, I rated the cellar. I think that this wine, it's delicious in its youth, but it's sacrificing. It's not an investment. If you leave this in the cellar, it will give dividends.
Definitely.
Yep.
So the oldest wine I could find in the wine cellar in our offices in Illinois here was a 15, which
was a fantastic vintage.
Classic vintage. I shouldn't be opening this, should I?
No, you should, and then have it later and enjoy the night.
Absolutely, and not only the night, but I think these wines, these wines that are meant to age, are also great a week or two later.
Oh, definitely.
We talked about a classic site. I think the Hipping site is, if you knew anything about German wine regions, the Hipping vineyard site might be considered a Grand Cru site. We tasted the Doctor Vineyard, which would be a Grand Cru type of site as well. And that wine I tasted last week with Max, we tasted it again last night, and it was delicious. So let's taste and talk about. I think Derek, he's anxious to taste, so he's way ahead of us. But Derek noted kind of the terroir and what that slate soil brings you is the spiciness, but I think also the tropicality and the richness also. Never losing that the acidity either. So let's taste it and see what we're dealing with here. Do you have a Hipping Spätlese open over there?
Yep, we have.
So we have the 18 as well.
We should have taken an older one too. It's still too young.
It's very young.
Very, very young.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice. It's easy to drink. It's delicious. The fruit and the
mouth-watering, the acidity. You kind of want to keep going. Yeah. It's very playful, and it will be very exciting to see how this wine develops over the next couple of years, centuries.
I looked at the technical analysis, and maybe this is Stefan and me getting a little geeky here, but the TA, measurable tartratable acidity, I think that I was reading said 8.9 grams per liter. Maybe.
I actually did not read it. Yeah. I wasn't briefed. So
that's a big number.
That is. As I said, the good thing was that we already had a really warm vintage in 2003, and everyone was getting crazy about ripe grapes. Me also. It was one of my first vintages. So I had 2003. I had great wines with no botrytis and high sugar content in grape, so a high Oechsler. And afterwards, I had wines that were great in use, but when they aged, they were just getting a bit, let's say, that's not right. a bit too big. Yeah. So there was no acidity. There was no like lovely, playful dancing on the tongue. So that's the good thing. So we knew in 2018 we have to be careful, and in 2018 it was the first year we harvested hipping before some other white grapes. So it was extremely different.
Yeah. So the Roter Hang was right before pretty much everything else. And what Stefan said is that we knew if we would wait too long and let the hipping grapes become too ripe, all of that joyful acidity will be gone just like that. So our aim is to keep that natural acidity, to have exactly this kind of playfulness and joy and long-lasting aging potential in the hipping.
Yeah, for me, the wine is, I have the 15 and the 18, I'm sure is probably right there based upon the technical analysis. But for me, I use the word electric, that it has so much acidity that it actually feels like you're being shocked, like you've licked an outlet, an electrical outlet. It's very, very great. And I mean, in a good way, of course.
Yeah.
In a good way. You know, we get a little, us wine geeks, we get a little crazy. So we use hyperbole quite a bit. We exaggerate, but the wine has such vibrancy and still has this spiciness, as Derek pointed out, but tropical fruit well beyond like pineapple. There's certainly pineapple, but there's like mango and passion fruit and deeper flavors in there too. And with the amount of in the RS, the residual sugar doesn't seem overwhelming. I think that the acidity keeps all that in check and in balance. And between the acidity and the sugar and the flavor profile, I can't wait. I apparently couldn't wait to see the full potential of the 15, but maybe I'll keep 18 around.
Yeah, you should.
I think 18 will be, I guess, great prolonging. Yeah, we can see that the 2003 vintage, even so, it hasn't that high acidity. It was and it is aging really good. Nobody thought about that, but 2018 was this purity and still the high, or at least tastable acidity. I guess it will be lasting nearly forever. Yeah, so we'll see. Yeah, I won't, but maybe the wines will.
Well, you can't take it with you, so I'm glad we got to crack it today. I think another thing that isn't in your presentation, but I think is definitely worth mentioning, is the value that these wines really bring. We're getting pretty wine geeky here, and we're talking about soil type, and we're talking about differences in vintages and flavor profile in a wine that is immortal. I mean, I think we used the word, and we're talking about a wine that's under $20. So how can you build a cellar with some of these terrific wines, and they will be drier and softer and more complex with age. But how can you, I can't think of any other region or any other wine that you would want to put a $20 bottle in the cellar to keep for 20 years.
Yeah, we just have to keep tell that the people that they get an extremely fantastic value.
Of course, we can be glad that we have the opportunity to work on those nearly perfect vineyard sites that our ancestors bought and managed and worked with. So and kept the soil alive. So I think it's like a heritage. Is it a heritage? Yeah. So that's the good thing about it. Yeah. The soils bring the power in the vines. We only have to try to bring the power from the vines into our cellar and into your glass. So
mission accomplished.
I guess it's yeah, we try to work the best way we know we can, and yeah, the good thing is our crew knows what we want, and we have the same workers in our vineyards from beginning of the year till the harvest, so they see every stage of the vines. So I think that's one good point too, to have a good team. We have Albrecht, of course, which has enormous knowledge of over 40 vintages, nearly 50. He managed on his own, and he still is yeah, the big backup in wine knowledge. So and knowing about the different parts in Nierstein and how they react. It took me about five years to know what to do with which vineyard in the cellar. So there were ups and downs, and there are still surprises. Yeah. So I think it's good to be in a good team and as a family owned. And still family owned, one of the oldest family owned wineries in Nierstein. That's a good point. So,
well, thank you for bringing these super affordable wines. The Paderborn cabinets, maybe $16, and for $1 more or so, you can get the dry Riesling, the Vom Koch. And those are three of your more popular wines, at least in terms of broader distribution here in the U.S. But you can find other Schneider wines, especially on the West Coast and East Coast. So keep an eye out for the you make a dry style from the red slate. That's if you can put the two back to back, it's totally demonstrable. Really interesting.
The exotic fruit of the hipping dry style, which is even it is it is really the same interesting point in tasting when you taste the Paderberg cabinet versus the hipping. You taste the limestone against the red slate in dry wine. So that's it's tasting stone, tasting rocks.
Yeah, I used to, when I did some wine education, I still do it. I do it a little bit less. I think I was on a big kick of making people actually lick stones. So I would bring slate stones out, and I'd say, go ahead and they'd smell the rock. And I'd say, well, you can't really smell the rock, but you can taste the rock. You could smell the rock. So you can literally lick these rocks and kind of taste what you end up in the wine, and sometimes even feel the texture of what you feel in the wine.
Sometimes if you don't want to lick it, especially what you said about the texture, you can touch them, and you can feel the stone, and you can taste the wines from the stone, and you find similarities. You feel the connection between stone and wine. So
yeah,
getting a bit misty.
I don't know. There's some sort of empirical evidence here that leads me to believe that we're not incorrect. So let's take a look at some of the shots that Stefan got today. I think that'll bring people a little closer to what the vegetative cycle is like on the vines in Nierstein and the Hipping Vineyard today. So I'm going to pull a couple of these shots in, and we can talk about what's happening in the vineyards and maybe a little bit about vintage. So let's take a look at what we have here. Here's a
to just to give a little info about what is taking place at the moment. We had 2 days of more rainy weather after a period of really warm and dry northeast windy times, which was nice to have, but it was also nice to have some days of rain now with no thunderstorms. It was just powering really good rain for 2 days, and after such times of heavy raining, the air is so pure and clear, you get the nicest pictures, especially with some clouds up. A look over the Hipping in the north direction to Frankfurt or direction of Mainz. The grapes are in really good shape, or the wines are in really good shape at the moment. They grew really fast. The flowering is in full progress. So we are expecting an early harvest, another early harvest, which I guess will begin in the beginning of September, with the maybe end of August, beginning of September with the early grapes, and so I guess we will finish harvest in the late September and beginning of October. So it will be again in if I could wish, we would have 5 weeks of nice weather. We'll see if that is working. Yeah. So, but at the moment we see it. Everything is really good, in good shape. Everything keeps growing. Also the young vines we planted or replanted a big part of Hipping this year, which is growing quite well.
So how
actually I'm glad. Yeah.
This is it's great to see 2020 off to a good start, if not an early start. This looks like fairly early flowering. How what if that's correct? How are you in terms of timing? Is this a week early, 2 weeks ahead of schedule, or where are we here in terms of
in comparison to the last years? I think it's I actually don't have the exact comparative dates, but I think it's 2 weeks before the average flowering time. But if you take the last 3 or 4 years, I think it's nearly quite normal. Yeah. So we had this early flowering, early ripening, early everything in the last years. So I think it's gonna be a similar. If everything stays as it is, it's gonna be a similar year to the last vintages with the time in September or August being the or the weather being the main part of deciding if it's good or bad. If we get rain in August and when we don't need it, that is the killer. Then it's going to be a really quick one. If it stays dry in August and September, we could have a really nice one like 18. So we'll see.
Well, we're working with Mother Nature here. Wine is still hopefully still an agricultural product, no matter what people try to tell you. There is wine that I think is made in a semi-industrial fashion, and that's not what we're talking about here. No.
In Europe, in Germany, in our winery, it stays traditional. So we, as you said, we are working with nature. We are working with all the climatic factors and risks, of course, but also with that gift. So that's the fun and, of course, the challenging fact about our job.
Yeah, we work with, I've been doing a lot of these virtual tastings, and we've been talking about terroir, and we focus a lot on soil and location, and that's certainly part of terroir. You mentioned that mankind, labor, the skill, what happens. I think that's part of terroir as well. Your interpretation of what that piece of land gives you, but also the vintage. That specificity of vintage is part of the terroir, and you have to reflect that. You should reflect that in the wines. There is going to be variability, and how you interpret that variability is part of that terroir. So I always say that wine is about a place, the people, and the time frame or the vintage that it came from. So every vintage is a little bit different, and if you can't taste it in the wines, then where's the uniqueness and where's the expression?
that's the difference if you get the wine from a winery than from a big company. So the wineries try to focus on every vintage and bring out the differences, so you can taste them. And if you do a big style company wine, maybe you try to cut the edges and make the wines a bit more mainstreaming. So
uniform.
Which does not have to mean they are bad, but they are not so unique and so challenging for the ones that taste the wine. So.
Well, I think we're close to the end of our tasting, but I wanted to show the video that you took here today so we can see what you were dealing with, and then I can see it's gotten dark in back of you, so we'll let you disappear here shortly and enjoy your evening and put the little ones to bed, the 10th generation there. But let's take a look at the video and
actually, they are glad that we are taking this video because they have can spend more time in front of the TV. So.
All right, let's take a look at the video here. And again, we're at the Hipping Vineyard site.
The rain is gone. Perfect view over the Niersteiner Hipping on the Rhine River.
I hate it when I hear myself.
On Nierstein. In the back, you can see the Paderberg.
Yeah, that's when I tried to focus on the Paderberg, but it did not work. So.
No, it's a great shot, and I really feel like you guys helped bring us to Germany. And when this lockdown, when our issues are hopefully conquered, and we see the ability to move safely, we look forward to coming to visit you at the winery in Nierstein. And hopefully it's a sunny day and we can get out into the vineyards with you as opposed to being put into the cellar.
Yeah, we can sure arrange that, or probably do both.
Try our best.
Yeah.
That's great, guys. Is there anything else you want to say? Is there anything we missed, or last words that I want to allow you to say to the internet out there?
I guess we missed a lot to say because there is a lot more to say about wine in general, in ours especially. We were glad that we got the opportunity to talk to you, to your customers, to show. To take you on a little trip into the Schneider estate and what we do and what we like to show. And we hope you guys enjoy the wines and know a little bit more about the family, the people, and the place where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we got a great peek at it. So I want to thank you both. Cheers.
Cheers.
And I want to thank everybody out there for listening. We'll be back with Wine Cellars Wine Wednesday. We'll have our old friend Charlie Master. You guys, Ursula knows Charlie, right?
I know Charlie.
We'll take a trip to France and we'll taste some regional wine from France. But we'll be back to Germany again soon. We'll probably be visiting with Frank Hayden towards the end of the month. So a not too far away neighbor of yours, and we'll taste his wines. But for today, I really enjoyed visiting with you guys. I love the wines and love what you're doing. So keep up the good work, you two, and enjoy your Saturday night. And everyone out there, please be safe.
We will. You too. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.